I never thought that the worst moment of my life would happen in a restaurant. Not on a battlefield, not in a hospital waiting room, not at the edge of some cliff where the wind was howling, and the world felt like it was ending. But in a quiet corner booth of a little Italian place called Rosario's, with a flickering candle on the table and the smell of garlic bread in the air, while my 7-year-old daughter sat across from me, wearing her best dress, the one with the tiny yellow sunflowers on it, telling me she loved me more than anything in the whole wide world. And I sat there, staring at an envelope that a complete stranger, a billionaire woman in a tailored coat who had walked into our lives for exactly 6 minutes, had left behind on what she thought was her table. An envelope addressed to no one. An envelope that, when I finally opened it, with shaking hands and read what was inside, completely changed the course of my life. So before I tell you what was in that letter, I need to ask you something directly. If you were sitting in my position, a broke, exhausted, grieving single father who had been carrying the weight of the world for 2 straight years, and a stranger accidentally left something behind that had the power to save you, would you open it? Would you give it back? Or would you sit there, frozen, doing exactly what I did for 45 agonizing minutes? Tell me in the comments, because honestly, even now, I'm still not 100% sure I made the right call. My name is Marcus, and I need to take you back about 2 years before that night at Rosario's, back to when life was something I actually recognized. I was 34 years old, working as a middle school science teacher in a mid-sized city in Ohio, and I was what most people would call content. Not rich, not famous, not doing anything the world would write headlines about, but I had a warm apartment, a job I genuinely loved, a daughter named Lily who had her mother's eyes and my stubborn streak, and a wife named Rachel who was, without any exaggeration, the best person I have ever known. Rachel was a physical therapist. She volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends. She made pancakes from scratch every Sunday morning, and she always remembered the names of everyone she met, every single time she saw them. She was the kind of person who made the whole room feel like it had more oxygen in it. And on a rainy Tuesday in November, a driver who had run a red light took her from us in about 2 seconds flat. Lily was 5, I was 34, and just like that, the world I had spent my whole adult life carefully building collapsed into a pile of something unrecognizable. I won't pretend the grief was manageable, because it wasn't. There were weeks where I called in sick to work and just lay on the couch while Lily watched cartoons, and I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember how to want things. There were months where I forgot to go grocery shopping, and we ate cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row, and I told Lily it was a special adventure, breakfast for dinner night, and she laughed like it was the greatest thing anyone had ever invented. And I went into the bathroom afterward and cried silently into a hand towel because she deserved so much more than cereal and a dad who was barely holding it together. My sister Karen came and helped when she could. My principal gave me as much grace as the school system allowed. But the bills kept arriving. Rachel had some life insurance, but it didn't go as far as people imagine those things go when you have a mortgage and a car payment and a child who is growing out of her shoes every 4 months. I picked up a weekend tutoring gig. I sold some things. I kept moving, the way you do when the only alternative is to stop. And stopping isn't really an option when you've got a little girl with sunflower dresses who needs her dad to keep going. By the time Lily turned 7, I had found a kind of rhythm. It wasn't the life I had planned. It was smaller, quieter, and lonelier in ways I didn't have language for. But it was ours, and I was protective of it. Lily was thriving in 2nd grade. She had a best friend named Priya, and an obsession with marine biology that led to about 47 library books about dolphins being checked out of our local branch in a single calendar year. She had started to process her mom's absence in the beautiful, strange way that children do. Talking about Rachel openly, matter-of-factly keeping her alive in the little rituals we maintained together. Every Sunday morning, I still made the pancakes from scratch. I kept that one. I kept that one as hard as I could. So when Lily's birthday rolled around that October, I decided we were going to do something special. Not birthday party at the house special, not cupcakes at school special, actually special. I had been saving a little bit here and there for a few months, squirreling away 20s in a jar on the top shelf of the pantry, because I wanted to take her to Rosario's. It sounds so small when I say it out loud now, but Rosario's was the nicest restaurant either of us had ever been to. It was the kind of place with real cloth napkins, and a bread basket that they refill without you asking, and a little votive candle on every table that makes everyone look like they're in a painting. Rachel and I had gone there once, on our 5th anniversary, and I had always thought I'd bring Lily when she was old enough to appreciate it. 7 felt right. It felt like the perfect age for a girl who loved dolphins and sunflower dresses to have her first real fancy dinner, and I wanted to give her that. I called ahead and made a reservation. Table for 2 for 7 o'clock, for a very important birthday. We got dressed up. Lily wore the sunflower dress. I put on the blazer that I had gotten dry cleaned for the first time in probably 2 years. We took a rideshare because I wanted the night to feel effortless, and when we walked into Rosario's and the host smiled at us and said, "Welcome," I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt like I was giving my daughter something real. We were seated at a corner booth near the window, and it was perfect. The candle was flickering, the bread came immediately. Lily's eyes went wide and she said, "Daddy, are those real cloth napkins?" And I said, "Yes, baby, you can put yours right on your lap like this." And she arranged it on her sunflower dress with the seriousness of someone performing a sacred ritual. We ordered lemonade and pasta, and I told her she could get dessert, the real fancy kind with the little chocolate sauce drizzled on the plate, and she grabbed my hand across the table and said, "I love you more than anything in the whole wide world." And I thought, this is it. This is the thing. This moment, right here, is the reason you keep going. And then the woman walked in. I noticed her because I think everyone in the restaurant noticed her. The way you notice when the temperature in a room shifts slightly. She was probably in her late 50s, elegantly dressed in a charcoal wool coat, with silver hair pulled back in a way that looked both effortless and intentional. She had the kind of posture that suggested she had spent her whole life walking into rooms and being comfortable there. She was alone, and she was being shown to her table by the maitre d', and then something happened that I wasn't quite prepared for. The maitre d' brought her to our table. Our corner booth. Our birthday table with the flickering candle, and the bread basket and Lily's sunflower dress carefully arranged on the lap of my daughter, who looked up at this woman with enormous curious eyes. There was a brief, polite confusion. The woman looked at the maitre d'. The maitre d' looked at his book. I looked at both of them and felt the first cold finger of anxiety run up the back of my neck. There had apparently been some kind of double booking situation, or a miscommunication, or something. The details were murky, and the maitre d' was flustered in the contained, professional way that good restaurant staff are flustered. Barely visible but definitely present. The woman looked at us. She looked at Lily in her sunflower dress, with her cloth napkin on her lap. She looked at the bread basket. And then she smiled, and it was a genuinely kind smile, and she said, "This is clearly a very special evening, and I wouldn't dream of interrupting it." She said it simply and, with no performance, the way people say things when they actually mean them. She told the maitre d' that she was perfectly happy to sit at the bar, and she'd had enough of tables for one anyway. And then she reached into the inside pocket of her coat, took out a small cream-colored envelope, and she set it on the edge of our table. She said, "Happy birthday" to the young lady, and then she walked away before I could say a single word in response. Lily looked at the envelope. I looked at the envelope. Then Lily looked at me with an expression that was equal parts delighted and bewildered, and she said, "Daddy, that lady left us a letter." I picked it up. It was sealed. It had no name on it, no address, nothing written on the outside at all. Just a small, heavy, cream-colored envelope that felt like it cost more than the dry cleaning on my blazer. I turned it over in my hands. I looked toward the bar, where the woman had settled onto a stool, and was now talking quietly to the bartender, her back to us, completely unbothered. I thought about walking over and returning it. I thought about asking the maitre d' to return it for me. I set it down on the table next to the bread basket. I picked it up again. I set it down again. Lily, bless her, had gone back to eating her bread with the focused joy of a 7-year-old who has been granted access to unlimited carbohydrates, narrating quietly to herself about how good the butter was. And I sat there holding this envelope and feeling like the floor had developed some kind of slow, gentle tilt. So here's where I need to pause and talk directly to you for a second. Because I've thought about this moment so many times in the months that followed, and I still don't know what the right answer is. That envelope was not addressed to me. The woman had set it down and walked away so quickly that it felt almost deliberate. Like she didn't want it returned, but I couldn't be sure of that. Maybe she had simply forgotten it. Maybe she thought she was leaving it for someone else. Maybe she had made some kind of mistake. What I know is that sitting in that corner booth with my daughter on her 7th birthday, I was a man who was 2 months behind on one credit card, running a tutoring side hustle to cover the gap left by a mortgage payment that Rachel's income used to help carry, and wearing a blazer that I had treated with the reverence of a tuxedo, because it was the nicest thing I owned that still fit. I want you to put yourself in that seat. Boss, I want you to feel the weight of that envelope in your hands, and the sound of your daughter humming to herself across the table, and I want you to tell me in the comments right now, what would you have done? Because what I did, after 45 minutes of going back and forth while we ate our pasta and Lily declared hers, the best thing she had ever tasted in her entire life, was open it. My hands were not entirely steady when I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a single sheet of the same heavy cream paper, folded in thirds, and a smaller envelope tucked inside that one. And when I unfolded the letter and started reading, I had to stop after the first line and start again because my brain simply refused to process it on the first pass. The letter was short. It was maybe 8 sentences long. But those 8 sentences rearranged something fundamental inside my chest. The woman, her name, I would learn, was Eleanor Hartwell. And yes, she was exactly who I would later discover she was. One of the most quietly influential philanthropists in the state. Had written that she had been watching us from across the restaurant for a few minutes before the seating mix-up occurred. She said she had watched me help my daughter arrange her napkin, and she had seen something in my face that she recognized. The particular exhaustion of someone who loves deeply and is doing it entirely alone. She said she was not in the habit of doing things like this, but that her late husband had always told her that the moments that feel presumptuous are often the moments that matter most. She said the smaller envelope inside contained something she hoped might make the next chapter a little easier to navigate. She said happy birthday to the young lady in the beautiful dress. She signed it simply Eleanor, with no last name, no contact information, nothing. I opened the smaller envelope. Inside was a certified bank check. I am going to tell you the number because I think if I don't, you won't fully understand what happened to me in the next 30 seconds. It was for $50,000, made out to cash, dated that day, completely, legally, negotiably real. I put it face down on the table immediately. I looked up at Lily, who was telling me about how she thought dolphins probably would like Italian food if they could try it. And she was so completely, gloriously herself in that moment that I had to press my lips together, very hard, and breathe through my nose for a few seconds. Then I looked toward the bar. Eleanor Hartwell was gone. Her stool was empty. Her coat was gone. She had slipped out while I was reading as quietly as she had arrived. And when I flagged down our server and asked about the woman who had been sitting at the bar, the server smiled and said she had settled her tab and left about 10 minutes ago, and that she had also, by the way, paid for our dinner. I will not pretend to you that I handled what followed with any kind of grace, because I did not. I sat in that corner booth for a long time after we finished eating, after Lily had consumed her chocolate dessert with the reverent focus it deserved, and I turned the check over and over in my hands, and I thought about every possible thing it could mean and whether I had any right to it, and what Rachel would have said if she had been sitting across from me, and whether Eleanor Hartwell had made some kind of mistake, and whether I needed to find her and give it back, or whether— and this was the thought that kept surfacing Quietly, with increasing insistence, this was exactly what it appeared to be. A gift. A simple, staggering, no-strings-attached act of grace from a stranger who had looked at a tired man and his daughter in a sunflower dress, and decided, for reasons entirely her own, to do something about it. I did some research in the weeks that followed. Eleanor Hartwell was not difficult to find once I had her name. She was a widow whose husband had built a considerable tech company in the 90s, and who had, after his death, turned her energy entirely toward what she called quiet philanthropy. Not the kind with galas and press releases and her name on buildings, but the kind that happened in corners, in small moments, in ways that were specifically designed not to be traced back or returned. I found one interview she had given, years earlier, where she said the most useful thing she had ever learned was that help given with no expectation of acknowledgement is the only kind of help that doesn't cost the recipient something. I read that line about 14 times. I thought about the check, which, by then, I had deposited, after 3 conversations with my sister Karen, that went in circles, and 1 conversation with a lawyer friend, who confirmed that yes, a certified check made out to cash was entirely legitimate and entirely mine. I thought about what the money had already started to do. The credit card, the 2 months of breathing room, the plan I had started building in a notebook, the plan that involved Lily's college fund, and a small repair to the roof that I had been putting off for a year and a half, and a savings account that finally had something in it worth protecting. I thought about what it meant to be seen, not helped out of pity, not rescued out of spectacle, but genuinely seen by another person who decided that seeing was not enough and did something about it. Eleanor Hartwell had looked at me across a restaurant, and she had recognized something true, and then she had acted on it with complete, unhesitating generosity, and then walked away before I could complicate it with gratitude or questions, or the uncomfortable weight that gifts sometimes carry. She had given me something, and then removed herself from the equation entirely, so that what remained was just the thing itself. The possibility, the room to breathe, the next chapter she had mentioned in her letter. I couldn't thank her directly, but I decided I could do something else. I started a notebook. I still have it, where I wrote down every small thing I could do for someone else in the spirit of that letter. It started small, paying for the coffee of the person behind me in line, leaving a larger tip than I could strictly afford, helping a neighbor carry groceries without being asked, letting someone merge in traffic. Small, anonymous things, offered without the expectation that anyone would know, or thank me, or remember. Over the months that followed, as my financial situation stabilized, and I found some solid ground under my feet, for the first time in 2 years, the things in the notebook got a little bigger. A student in my class whose family I knew was struggling, whose school supplies I replaced quietly and without fanfare. A colleague going through a divorce who found a gift card to the grocery store in her mailbox, with no name on it. Small ripples, going outward, from the stone that Eleanor had dropped into my life on a birthday night in October. Lily is 9 now. She still wears the sunflower dress occasionally, though it is getting too short, and she has informed me, with great seriousness, that she plans to keep it forever, even when she can no longer wear it, because it is a special dress and special things deserve to be kept. She has 43 dolphin facts memorized, and she still insists on the pancakes every Sunday morning, and she talks about her mom with the open, matter-of-fact tenderness of someone who has made peace with a hard truth and chosen love anyway. We are okay. More than okay. The roof doesn't leak. There is money in the savings account. I coach the science club after school, and I have started talking to a therapist, which Rachel would have pushed me to do years ago, and which has, as she would have predicted, made a significant difference. I don't know where Eleanor Hartwell is or if she thinks about us. I suspect she does not, and I mean that in the most complimentary way possible. I suspect she went home from Rosario's that night, hung up her charcoal coat, and got on with her life, because people who do good quietly are generally people who don't require the good to live on in their awareness to feel worth doing. But here is what I know, what that envelope and that letter and that check and that woman taught me in 6 minutes at a corner booth on my daughter's birthday. The most powerful thing you can do for another person is to see them clearly, act on what you see, and then trust them completely with the result. No strings, no performance, no requirement that they be grateful in a way you can witness. Just the gift, offered and released, and then you walk away and let it become whatever it needs to become. I carry that with me everywhere now. Into my classroom, into my neighborhood, into the small daily decisions about when to reach out, and when to let someone carry their own weight, and when the right thing is to set something down on the edge of someone's table and walk away before they can make it complicated. If this story moved you at all, if you felt something in your chest when I described opening that envelope, or when I talked about Lily and her sunflower dress, and the way she loves her mother even now, I want you to like this video, because it tells me that you were with me, that you felt what I was trying to share, and that matters to me. If you want more stories like this one, stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary grace in moments they didn't see coming, subscribe, because I will keep telling them, for as long as there are people who want to hear them, and I want to know your thoughts on every part of this. Would you have opened the envelope? Would you have given it back? Have you ever been the recipient of a kindness so large it changed something in you permanently? Or have you ever been the one to offer something like that to a stranger and then simply walk away? Put all of it in the comments. I read every single one. I'll see you all in the next story.